Hi all, let's look at another interesting game from the World Championship Candidates Tournament. Sergey Karjakin against Wesley. So d4 from Sergey. We have knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, inviting the Nimzo-Indian variation. e3, the Rubinstein variation, a very solid move. One of my former club mates, Steve Weston, used to recommend this move. So black castles now. Wesley so castles. Knight f3, d5, and now quite unusual move, bishop d2. This looks slightly strange to me, and in fact in live book this is played usually routinely, bishop d3. For example, this variation is very heavily trodden, and it's thought to be about even. So this is slightly maybe prepared for this game. There's a slight innovation. We have c5, a3, c takes d4. Now perhaps black can force things as well with this move, and then knight e4, lunge in with knight e4 to take away that bishop. And here white has a small edge, but it shouldn't be that critical. But in the game's continuation, it seems for a moment not too bad either for black. It seems actually this continuation is very interesting here, where Wesley so takes the queens off and maybe claims he's got structural advantage, even though white's got the bishop pair. This looks like these double pawns don't look too healthy. We have bishop d7, king e2, rook c8, and now here it seems as though there's a very precise move that might offer white a nag, knight e5. This wasn't played actually in the game bishop d3, but knight e5 protects that bishop instead of moving it back. And I'll give you an example. This line with b5, the bishops seem pretty healthy. Black doesn't want to take that, so we're now taking on d7. The bishops seem healthy here, with white having more than a slight advantage, it seems. So knight e5 is interesting in this line, but instead this bishop retreated away from being attacked instead of being protected. We have knight d5, knight e5, and here with the king here, there's actually a remarkable defensive try. No, sorry, not quite here. Remember the king's on e2 though. The bishop drops back to e8 here. As another possibility, if taking, which seems you might be wondering about this in any case, white can actually just play rook to c1, hc1, and reaches basically an advantageous position. If he can get a rook quickly to the 7th rank, white has a small edge there. That's really quite annoying, this end game for black. White has a small edge in that position. So anyway, here we have knight e5, bishop e8, so the bishop just dropping back to e8. Now bishop d2 was played. Now it's here. There's a good, it seems to be there's a good resource black has to attack this head double pawned with knight a6. As an example, if taking, we have bang, bishop b5 check. Now knight a6, yeah, it does seem pretty annoying, and if say b5, then this looks very comfortable for black. So I think this does represent an opportunity, knight a6, and it's based on the king being on e2, but it wasn't played here. Instead f6 was played, and now knight c4. And now it's difficult to play knight a6. You might think it's still possible. Actually knight d6, and it's pretty annoying now. So this is difficult to play, because this would give white a lot of play basically. There's a very sharp line here, but it ends up white's fine anyway there. So anyway, rook d8, rook hc1, knight c6. Now bishop e4, actually giving up the b pawn to collect these two guys. So this is quite a trade of this, and it's undoubling white's pawns of course, but black's going to end up losing 2 pawns. But the end scenario of this particular short-term trade is also white goes into a self-pin. White goes a pawn up, but for a self-pin. If you look at this position here, we're about to see awkwardness at the expense of white winning a pawn. So knight d takes b4, basically undoubling white's pawns. White gives up the bishop pair and proceeds to win 2 pawns on the trot. One there, one there. But now what looks to be a nasty self-pin. Basically white's gone into a self-pin to win this material. So that bishop is immobilized because a rook takes a7 basically. White plays knight a6. And here Wesley basically plays a move which still engines are not outraged by, but from a human point of view it does require great accuracy to play this. Wesley tries to restore, not just to get it be equal on pawns, but to make it kind of symmetrical, which you might think is a big safety zone to create a symmetrical pawn structure, equal on material with the same minor pieces, basically even the same coloured bishops. So this move is tempting to try and win a pawn back, knight d3, try and win a pawn back, but it does let white get away from this self-pin. That's the transaction here basically that's happening. If black in fact keeps that pin with knight d5, this might be fine, it seems. As an example, h3, g5, king going back, king g7. It looks as though white is kind of immobilized here, and if I'm not entirely sure how white would proceed. In fact, you know, here say yeah, it looks as though this should be okay, basically keeping that pin. So the continuation here has, in one way it seems to aim for a non-controversial territory, but in another, unfortunately, it's more subtly controversial. It's first of all, it's letting white out of this pin. It gets the pawn back for sure. Rook d1, inviting black to take that pawn on b2. Because otherwise, maybe there's things like knight c5 anyway, torturing that pin. So white gives up that pawn. He wants to get away from this pin. And you might think, well, black surely is fine now. Bishop c6. But have a look at this position. This happens now in the game. This position here requires an accurate move here. Otherwise, black could be getting into very serious difficulties. This position here, the rook is more active than black's rook. The king's more restricted than white's king. It is a symmetrical pawn structure on both sides of the board. So you can understand why a quick evaluation, human evaluation, even by Super G, might think this is fine for black. But, yeah, this requires accuracy. It seems the most accurate move might be rook b6. For example, knight d4, knight c4. This protects e6 in advance, you see. And if f4, quick e5. And this kind of position should be okay. Black should have enough here to stop any infiltration with the king. It should be only a small edge and not able to sort of really increase it. Although it does look pretty... In one way, it looks as though the king is a prisoner and it's white that's playing for a win. But this might be the way to go in any case. Rook b6. What happens in the game, if rook c8, then it's an immediate loss with knight e7 check. And yeah, I've had fun looking at this position. If rook b3, this is nasty because of knight d8 hitting e6. This is nasty. And here, rook e7 hits e6 again, and e6 is dropping. White has a big advantage there. So that's why I'm saying I believe black has to be really careful here. And played, actually, instead of rook b6, played this move, which also kind of condemns the rook as well as the king to passivity for the foreseeable future. e4, and white aims for a pawn wedge now on e5. So this knight's being kicked around as well, but a pawn wedge from e5, and you might think, well, can black play e5? As soon as black plays e5, he didn't play king f8. If black plays e5, it's a target on e5, and we just do this, and it's going to be a fixed target. The king's going to come round to d5. It's going to be a bit tortureful. White has a small edge there anyway. But yeah, there's torture potential there to put black on the torture rack. But anyway, knight d6. This position, king f8 was played. e5, so establishing this pawn wedge. Knight f5, g4, kicking the knight around. And the king is infiltrating now. This king is getting more aggressive. Rook a2 protecting that pawn, also threatening rook f2 now. So rook c8 counter-attacking on this knight. King b5. So with rook f2 threatened, it seems that even here, black can apparently stay in the game, although this is getting close to being fatal. This is dancing on ice. If you're a beginner, dancing on ice. I don't recommend it generally. But rook c7, basically. Black is dancing on ice, but rook c7, apparently, this should be okay for black, this position. Because if white tries the check over here, king f7, the check here, king e7, it should just be perpetual check time. So it seems as though rook c7 might be the move here. But in the game, king e8, and you might think, oh, where's the ice? Why is this cutting for black? Well, guess what? White to play in this position. If I give you 5 seconds starting from now, white to play. Okay, king b6 threatening, king b7, winning the rook in broad daylight. Yeah, black plays g5, maybe hoping to get a pawn or two, you know, maybe taking there, taking here, taking here. But this pawn is actually protected, so it's only going to be one pawn if that's an exchange sack there. We have black desperately giving up a knight now. If he plays, his position really is going downhill because of king b7. If he plays this, then maybe even check here and then just take here, and it's horrible. White has a big advantage there. So black desperately here gives up the knight, yeah, for a pawn. And this pawn is attacked, it's protected, and white's basically a knight up. Yeah, it's a knight up. So the knight comes back, king comes back, it's consolidating. It's clear consolidation, piece up, without much compensation. Move 46, Wesley so resigned. Now, my conclusions from this game is bishop d2 is novel, the pawn structure was novel. With the king on e2, there did seem to be a powerful resource knight a6 at one point because of the king's position, where that would have really given the c5 square and black would have been in the driving seat. After that missed opportunity, it seemed as though white was able to go a pawn up in exchange for a self pin. Then Wesley so tried to equalise in inverted commas by getting his pawn back, but getting white out of the self pin, and white ended up with this powerful rook on the 7th and a more aggressive king. And then there was like one slip up basically, and white had a decisive advantage then. So a very interesting positional struggle this game. But yeah, credit to Sergey for this innovative bishop d2. So they are slipping in these moves in this candidates tournament, which are off the beaten tracks, to try and really test their opponents' nerves and improvisation, I believe. So trying to get people out of their preparation seemed to work in this game. That weird looking bishop d2, which might become more popular as a result of this game in particular, this very high profile precedent being set here in this game. But it does come with a clear downside that some of the variations did show that the king in the centre gives black resources like knight a6 to hitting that pawn. This pawn structure didn't look ideal basically, but you have to find the exact resources sometimes to really prove that downside. Okay, I hope you got something from that. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.